doing. Yesterday, the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the United Kingdom had to speak to the British people, outlining the measures that the British government is embarking upon with the objective of cushioning the British public against the difficulties that the twin crises are causing the world over and in the United Kingdom. Here in Ghana, even before that, you heard us mention that the president, as part of the regular quarterly cabinet retreats, had spent a lot of time on the economy and had tasked his ministers to do some work on various parts of it. And we had mentioned earlier that the minister responsible for finance will later this week, and that's actually today, have the opportunity to speak to the nation about the measures that government will be rolling out upon the president's instructions. There was a need to do some stakeholder engagement between the cabinet retreat and now. It is my understanding that some of that, a good chunk of that has been completed, but there's still some work to be done. But the minister is in a position to speak to the nation and outline the raft of measures that the Akufo-Addo administration will be rolling out in helping to cushion Ghanaians against the economic hardships that the world is going through. So the context within which we're having this conversation is how the Akufo-Addo administration is seeking to cushion Ghanaians in the face of global economic difficulties. I want to, at this stage, invite to the podium the Honourable Minister responsible for Finance, the Honourable Ken Ofori-Atta, to deliver his remarks. After that, we'll take your questions and he will provide some responses. Minister, we're in your hands.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Kojo. It's good to be here. I think I was with you all in January, and we had a good session there. But good afternoon. Good afternoon indeed, ladies and gentlemen of the press and fellow citizens. Thank you for availing yourselves this afternoon to this important intervention press conference from here. I'm here today to announce to you measures to address the economic difficulties we are facing due mainly to recent global and domestic events. These difficulties have manifested in rising fuel prices, rising inflation and cost of living, exchange rate depreciation, rising interest rates, and revenue mobilization challenges. Government had its first regular quarterly retreat for 2022 from 18th to 20th March at Pejuase, concluding in Accra on Monday, the 21st of March. During the retreat, Cabinet deliberated extensively on a number of issues and approved a number of measures to support current efforts to address the challenges we are facing. Also on Monday, March 21st, 2022, the Bank of Ghana announced a number of complementary monetary measures to address the rising cost of goods and services on the market and the worrying performance of the cedi against major currencies. Ladies and gentlemen, it's important to stress right from the onset that the difficulties we are facing in Ghana are not peculiar to Ghana. It should also be stressed that several governments in both developed and developing countries are busily coming out with various prescriptions to bring their economies back to work and on track. After the devastating impact of COVID-19, which distorted global supply chains and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. If we look at the world today, there are two clear forces shaping global events: the impact of the novel coronavirus pandemic and the crisis in Ukraine. With the virus, the records show that our decision to focus first on protecting lives and then livelihoods has paid off. By February, globally, some 7.03% of those infected by COVID-19 had died. For Africa, the figure was 4.03%, about 251,444 people. In comparison, less than 0.89%, that is 1,445 people of infected people in Ghana died. May their souls rest in peace. Against all odds, but due to firm leadership, bold initiative, and responsive citizens, Ghana has so far collectively managed the virus remarkably well. But we knew that Ghana, like most countries in the world, had a tall list of coronavirus-induced bills to pay from 2020 and 2021, and came out of plans and policies to boost investor confidence and job prospects for 2022 and beyond. As you recall, we lost 13.1 billion of revenue and had to increase our expenditure by 14.2 billion, with combined fiscal impact of 26 billion Ghana cedis, about 6.8% of GDP in just 1 year. For government, 2022 was now the time to go full steam ahead in healing the economy to create jobs, especially for our young generation. This was evidenced by our growth figures, averaging 5.2% in 2021, up from 0.4% in 2020, and a startling 6.6% growth in the third quarter of 2021. We outline our comprehensive recovery program, the 100 billion CD Ghana Cares Obatampa program, to focus on the real sector to do just that. Our 10 billion Ghana Youth Start program will be the most historic intervention for youth employment in our country. However, three things that we did not and could not predict hit us. That, one, that Parliament will approve government's 2022 budget statement, the appropriation and its expenditure plans, and then turn around to vote against one of the key revenue generation measures that was being introduced, the e-levy. That the unyielding stance of the minority in Parliament against the e-levy would gravely affect investor confidence in our capacity to implement our programs and settle our debts, triggering a downgrading by credit rating agencies, and now leaving the cedi vulnerable as we could not access the international capital markets. Ladies and gentlemen, the third hit was the launch of the attack on Ukraine by Russia on February 24, 2022. The war in Ukraine could not have come at a worse time for the global economy. Already, global efforts towards economic recovery from the devastation wreaked by the coronavirus pandemic were being disturbed by supply chain disruptions, surging inflation, and uncertainties in the financial markets with anticipated hikes in interest rates. After February 24, we saw a sharp hike in global oil prices, food prices shocks, especially wheat, oil and gas price hikes, capital risks, aversion, flight to safety, affecting private capital flows to emerging markets as a whole, and all with serious macroeconomic implications. For example, crude oil prices per barrel increased by 75.3% from $74.17 in December 2021, when the 2022 budget was passed, to $130 on 7th March 2022, before moderating to $115 as of today. Crude oil prices crossed the $100 mark for the first time since September 2014. We recall that prior to the pandemic, we had built resilience through the implementation of bold and prudent economic measures. By April 2019, we had successfully, as a country, completed the 4-year IMF program. We did so and more by achieving an annual average real growth, GDP growth of 7% between 2017 and 2019, from 3.4% in 2016, maintaining a fiscal deficit below 5% of GDP for 3 consecutive years, maintaining a positive primary balance for 3 consecutive years, which put our debt on a sustainable path, lowering lending rates by over 10 percentage points, restructuring the banking sector to protect the savings of 4.6 million depositors and strengthening the financial sector. So far, government has spent over 25 billion since 2018 to clean up the financial sector, reducing inflation from 15.4% in December 2016 to 7.6% in 2019, and preserving the integrity of the local industry. Improving gross international reserves to reach 8.6 billion, or about 4 months of import cover by 2020. Introducing the most ambitious social welfare policy ever seen in our country, the Free SHS program. Constructing and rehabilitating more roads, cumulative of about 6,250 kilometers, completing 6 of 11 interchanges and flyovers, more than any other government in our history. Employing more new teachers, nurses, doctors, agri extension officers, and young graduates than any government in our history. Saving the entire financial sector from inherited, neglected crises that has cost government some 25 billion so far. Instigating more value for money audits on public procurements than any government in our history, and investing more resources in the police, military, governance, and anti-corruption institutions than ever before. It is this proven record of fixing what is broken that gave the MPP government the confidence to tackle head-on the devastation unleashed by COVID-19. And it is the same can-do and will-do attitude that gives us hope that we will overcome the current crisis. We are not a people to bow to the spirit of despondency and despair. As well as threatening global peace, the war in Ukraine has had far-reaching impact. We do not know how long the conflict will last, but it is clear that it has already forced many countries in Europe and beyond to adjust their economic plans for 2022, and Africa is likely to be amongst the worst hit outside of Ukraine. UNCTAD's rapid assessment of the war's impact on trade and development shows a rapidly worsening outlook for the world economy, with the situation especially alarming for African countries. The Russia-Ukraine war has also compounded the global supply chain and trade disruptions brought about by COVID-19 pandemic, as well as adversely impacted the dreaded 3 Fs: food security, fuel price escalation, and financing conditions. That's impacting living conditions with the capacity to derail global recovery efforts in 2022 and beyond. Global inflation trending upwards has led to central banks raising interest rates globally, resulting in tight financing conditions and reversal of capital inflows, especially to emerging markets. For example, the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank announced a hike in interest rates by 0.25 percentage points on 16 March and has signaled more of such to follow. Similarly, the Bank of England has raised its policy rate by another 25 basis points to 0.75% on 17 March 2022. We've seen the highest inflation in U.S., U.K., Germany, and other advanced countries since 1974. The U.S.'s inflation increased by 6.5 percentage points from 1.4% in January to 7.9% in February 2022. Similarly, inflation in Germany increased by 4.1 percentage points from 1% in January 2022 to 5.1% in February 2022. Since the COVID-19 pandemic struck, more than 60% of African sovereigns have suffered downgrades across the region. Ghana witnessed a downgrade from Fitch on 21st January 2022 to B- with a negative outlook, while Moody's downgraded Ghana to Caa1 with a stable outlook on 4 February 2022, even though S&P affirmed Ghana's rating at B- with a stable outlook on 7 February 2022. These downgrades have had implications for market access, exchange rate depreciation, capital flight, and increased cost of financing. Ladies and gentlemen, on the domestic front, the challenges include the impasse in Parliament, which is adversely affecting government business, such as the passage of some revenue bills, including the e-levy bill. This is creating uncertainty, which has been highlighted as a key risk by the rating agencies and affected our credit spreads, limiting our access to the international capital markets. The adverse global developments are impacting severely on exchange rate depreciation and domestic inflation as investors take refuge in safer assets by stocking up on the dollar, which is considered the safest currency to hold. The cedi has not been spared. Cumulatively, our local currency has depreciated by 15.6% against the US dollar and 13.4% and 13.3% respectively against the pound sterling and euro in the year to 23rd March 2022. This understandably is consumers alike. However, we also need to recognize that in spite of it all, the cedi has held under these extreme challenges better than it did between 2014 and 2015. This is because the fundamentals are much stronger. The Bank of Ghana has announced measures to address the exchange rate depreciation, and we believe in the propriety of the measures they outlined on Monday. The rising international price of crude oil and the exchange rate depreciation are affecting the ex-pump prices of fuel domestically as it feeds into high transportation fares and hence inflation. For example, the average ex-pump price of diesel for 3 OMCs, Goil, Total, and Vivo increased by 59.7% from 6.7 cedis per litre on 1st January 2022 to 10.7 cedis per litre by the 21st of March 2022. Ghana is not alone here. From Angola and Malawi through Nigeria and Rwanda to Senegal down to Zimbabwe, fuel prices are soaring. Some neighboring countries are not only dealing with rising petrol prices, but also scarcity on petroleum products, leading to long queues at filling stations. It remains the case, however, that one of the biggest drivers of price increases in goods and services in Ghana is a fuel price hike. Inflation has surged to 15.7% at the end of February 2022. Food inflation increased from 12.8% in December 2021 to 17.4% in February 2022, while non-food inflation rose from 12.5% to 14.5% over the same period. Ladies and gentlemen, provisional data on the stock of debt as at the end of December 2021 showed that the stock of public debt increased to 351.8 billion, 80.1% of GDP, compared with 218.2 billion, 61.2% of GDP at the end of 2022 before the pandemic. Of the total debt stock, domestic debt was 181.8 billion, 51.7%, while the external debt was 170 billion, 48.3%. Ladies and gentlemen, the global and domestic developments I've outlined above are affecting the effective implementation of the budget. Urgent and decisive actions are therefore required to address the challenges and ensure the achievements of the objectives and targets of the 2022 budget, including unleashing the entrepreneurial verve of the Ghanaian youth. Whilst we are in the process of revising the 2022 fiscal framework to reflect current developments with a view to go to Parliament to seek approval for the revisions during the mid-year review in July, government will pursue additional measures to ensure the achievement of the fiscal deficit target of 7.4% of GDP. Ladies and gentlemen, government had already started the new year with spending cuts as Parliament failed to approve key revenue streams at the appropriate time. In January 2022, government announced and immediately began implementing a 20% expenditure cut as part of fiscal stabilization and debt sustainability measures. It has been done through the quarterly expenditure ceiling allotment to MDAs. Quarter 1 allotment is currently in implementation, whilst Quarter 2 allotment will be issued shortly. The ministry has strengthened its expenditure monitoring systems and processes to ensure effective implementation of these measures. In addition, government has decided to take the following measures to ensure the achievement of the fiscal deficit target of 7.4% of GDP for 2022. So, expenditure cutting measures. Discretionary spending is to be further cut by an additional 10%. The Ministry of Finance is currently meeting with MDAs to review their spending plans for the rest of the 3 quarters to achieve the discretionary expenditure cuts. 2, these times call for very efficient use of energy resources. In line with this, there will be a 50% cut in fuel coupon allocations for all political appointees and heads of government institutions, including SOEs, effective 1st February 2022. With immediate effect, government has imposed a complete moratorium on the purchase of imported vehicles for the rest of the year. This will affect all new orders, especially four-wheel drives. We will ensure that the overall effect is to reduce total vehicle purchases by the public sector by at least 50% for the period. Again, with immediate effect, government has imposed a moratorium on all foreign travels except pre-approved critical statutory travels. 5, government will conclude on ongoing measures to eliminate ghost workers from the government payroll by end December 2022. Government will conclude the renegotiations of the energy sector IPP's capacity charges by end of quarter 3 2022 to further reduce excess capacity payments by 20% to generate a total savings of 1.5 billion Ghana cedis. We will impose a moratorium on establishment of new public sector institutions by end of April 2022. Prioritize ongoing public projects over new projects. This is to enhance the efficient use of limited public funds over the period by finishing ongoing or stalled but approved projects. Reduce expenditure on all meetings and conferences by 50% effective immediately. Pursue a comprehensive reprofiling strategies to reduce the interest expense burden on the fiscal, and liaise with organized labor and employers association to implement with immediate effect the measures captured in the Kwao Declaration of the 2022 National Labour Conference, including reforms towards addressing salary inequities, inequalities, example Article 71, office holders. The weak link between pay to productivity and sustainability of the payroll. Let me say this. President Akufo-Addo has absolutely no intention to roll back on any major policy like the free SHS. We see education as the best enabler for sustainable economic growth and transformation.